The elevator rose without hurry, as if it had all evening. Valerie Hargrave watched the numbers change with the same expression she used for quarterly earnings and courtroom risk: neutral, precise, uninviting. The mirrored wall behind her gave back the clean geometry of her suit, the sharp fall of her hair, the stillness in her mouth that made people speak more than they meant to. Iris Delacroix stood to Valerie's left, half a step back without being told. She held a slim folder against her ribs, knuckles pale where the paper edge pressed into her palm. The air in the elevator smelled faintly metallic, warm from the day's bodies, and underneath it, something expensive and dry on Valerie's skin. Cedar. Smoke. The quiet aftermath of a scent that didn't need to announce itself. Their reflection made them look like strangers caught in an accidental symmetry. Valerie tall and carved from restraint, Iris narrower, blurred at the edges by the gray suit she had chosen on purpose. The kind of suit that erased hips, softened shoulders, made her face disappear behind heavy frames and a tight, punishing knot of hair. Valerie didn't look at Iris. She didn't need to. The holder shifted once, a tiny sound, paper against paper. Valerie's gaze flicked down not to the folder, but to the hand holding it. The grip. The whitened fingertips. The quiet insistence of pressure. It was nothing. It was everything. The elevator chimed. The doors slid open. Corporate carpet. Cooling air. The hum of lights that never slept. "Conference room B," Valerie said as if she were naming a fact, not an invitation. Her voice was low and clean, a blade laid flat. Iris followed. She always followed. Not with eagerness, no. Never with anything that could be accused of wanting. Only with competence. Only with that careful kind of obedience that looked like professionalism until you stared at it too long. The corridor was empty at this hour. Most of the building had already emptied itself of breath and laughter and small talk. The last few assistants had gone, the last few analysts had taken their laptops and their hunger home. There were only the night cleaners somewhere distant, and the occasional low ping of a security door relocking itself. Valerie walked with the measured speed of someone who had never once been hurried by another person's schedule. Iris matched it, adjusting unconsciously, shortening her stride, then lengthening it when she realized she'd fallen behind. Tiny recalibration. No. Not that. Not chasing. When Valerie pushed open the conference room door, the light inside was already on. She had told facilities to leave it. She didn't like entering a dark room. Darkness suggested uncertainty. Darkness suggested someone else controlled the first impression. The room smelled of old air and whiteboard marker. The long table gleamed under the overhead lights, too polished, too reflective, like a surface that existed to expose mistakes. Valerie set her phone face down near the head of the table. Iris placed the folder at Valerie's right, aligned with the table edge as if the straightness mattered, as if exactness could keep them both safe. Valerie loosened one button on her jacket. A single movement. Efficient. Iris saw it anyway. She saw everything. It was ridiculous the way Iris noticed details. It was how she had survived. The earliest years of her 20s had taught her to track tone, pace, intention, taught her that danger rarely arrived shouting. It arrived quiet, smiling, patient. Valerie took her seat. Iris didn't sit. "Read me the revised language," Valerie said. Iris opened the folder with practiced care, like a ritual. Page 1. Sound of paper in a silent room. Iris cleared her throat once, barely audible. She began. Her voice was steady. It always was. That steadiness had brought her here, 3 floors above where she belonged, alone in a room that normally swallowed junior employees whole. She read the clause slowly, precisely, each sentence shaped for legal defensibility. Valerie listened with her eyes lowered, fingertips resting near the base of her wineglass, empty, untouched. Valerie didn't drink at work functions. Valerie didn't drink at all unless she was alone. When Iris finished, Valerie waited. Not as a test. Not exactly. It was a pause that belonged to Valerie, like the rest of the room belonged to Valerie, like the entire building belonged to her. Iris learned those pauses. Iris learned what lived inside them. Valerie's finger traced the rim of the glass once only. A circle that meant nothing. It meant, "Think again." Iris inhaled, then spoke softly. "There's a second option." Valerie's gaze lifted. It landed on Iris' eyes, through the thick frames, through the careful dullness Iris had wrapped around herself. Iris felt the weight of the attention in her throat first, like a touch made of heat and pressure. She turned to the next page. If we adjust the indemnification language here. Valerie's hand rose. Stop. Iris stopped immediately. Her mouth closed on the rest of the sentence. She stood very still, aware of the exact shape of her body in space. Shoulders back. Chin neutral. Eyes forward. Valerie looked at Iris for a long moment, as if reading something that wasn't written on the page. Then quietly, "You're tired." The words were simple, almost clinical. But something about the directness, the fact that Valerie had said it out loud, the fact that Valerie had noticed, sent a small chill through Iris' chest. "I'm fine," Iris said automatically. Valerie didn't respond. She only watched, and that watching made Iris aware of her own lie. The faint ache in her neck from the tight bun. The dryness behind her eyes. The way her stomach had been empty for hours, an emptiness she had mistaken for discipline. Valerie's gaze dropped to Iris's hair. Then back to Iris' face. Not approving. Not disapproving. Assessing. "I didn't ask if you were fine," Valerie said. Iris swallowed. Functional. A tiny corner of Valerie's mouth shifted, not quite a smile. More like the ghost of recognition. Like she understood the language Iris lived in. Functional. Capable. Surviving. Valerie reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a pen. Silver, heavy, expensive. She placed it on the table between them, precisely centered like a line drawn on a map. "Sit," she said. It should have felt like an order. It did. But it also felt like a permission Iris hadn't realized she wanted. Iris sat in the chair nearest to Valerie, not across the table, nearer than she would have chosen if she were choosing. The leather was cool under her thighs. The air seemed warmer now, concentrated in the small space between their bodies. Valerie pushed the folder slightly closer to Iris. Her fingers brushed the edge of the paper. A millimeter from Iris' hand. Nothing touched. Nothing happened. Iris felt it anyway. The body, Iris had learned, reacted before language. It betrayed you. It warmed. It tightened. It leaned forward without permission. Iris held very still. Her palms rested flat on her lap, hidden from view, as if hiding them could hide what she felt. Valerie spoke, still calm. Read the second option. Iris did. Her voice kept its steadiness, but her breathing changed. She heard it in herself, a slight unevenness. A faint hitch at the end of longer sentences. She adjusted, recentered, made herself smooth again. Valerie listened with the same attention she gave to potential acquisitions. When Iris finished, Valerie nodded once. "That," Valerie said. "That's better." The praise should have felt professional. It did. It also landed somewhere else, somewhere stupid and tender inside Iris, somewhere that wanted to be noticed for more than the work. Iris looked down at the folder so she wouldn't look at Valerie. She made her eyes stay on the paper. Valerie's phone vibrated once on the table. A soft tremor in the stillness. Valerie didn't reach for it right away. She waited as if the phone should learn patience. Then she turned it face up and glanced at the screen. Iris saw the notification because Valerie didn't hide it. She didn't angle the screen away. She didn't guard herself against being seen. A message. A name. A request. Money by Friday. No greeting. No softness. Only need. Valerie's face did not change. But Iris saw the smallest thing. The micropause behind Valerie's eyes. The flicker of something that rose and was immediately buried. A crack sealed over before it could spread. Valerie's thumb moved across the screen. Tap. 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 The quiet language of transfer. She placed the phone back down, face down again. Nothing was said. Nothing was explained. But the silence had changed shape. Iris felt the room tilt slightly as if gravity had adjusted. Valerie stared at the folder as if it had become irrelevant. Her hand rested on the table, fingers splayed. One finger trembled once, faintly, then went still. Iris's gaze fixed on that finger. Her mind did what it always did. It looped. It circled. It refused to leave the thing it had noticed. What kind of loneliness has a sound? Iris imagined Valerie's penthouse at night. Too large, too clean, echoing with the careful rhythm of a woman who didn't allow herself to make noise. A woman who could buy anything except the one thing she never spoke about wanting. Iris's mouth opened, then closed again. She wanted to ask. Not the obvious question. Not, Is everything okay? That kind of question was a performance. She wanted to ask the real thing, the dangerous thing. Do you ever get tired of being the one who sends? No. Not that. Not yet. Valerie looked up. Her gaze found Iris' face again, and this time it stayed there. Not briefly. Not professionally. Long enough to make Iris' skin feel too thin. Iris held her gaze. She did not look away. Valerie's eyes narrowed slightly, as if she were testing a theory. Her voice, when it came, was quieter than before. What did you see? Iris' throat tightened. I don't understand. Valerie leaned back in her chair, jacket still perfect, posture still composed. But there was something different, something less armored, as if she had unhooked a clasp inside herself. You always know, Valerie said. Before I say it. Before I ask. You anticipate. Iris's fingers curled in her lap. It's my job. Valerie's gaze dipped briefly to Iris' mouth. Then back to her eyes. That's the lie you tell yourself, Valerie said. Iris felt heat rise into her face, sharp and humiliating. She wanted to deny it. She wanted to laugh it off. She wanted to disappear back to 3 floors below where she belonged. Instead, she sat very still, like a person refusing to flinch. Valerie's voice softened by a fraction. Why? The question was small, but it split the air. Iris searched for a safe answer. There wasn't one. Because if I want, I lose. Because being noticed has cost me before. Because my body has always been treated like something people could take their opinions from. Because I don't want to be seen for the wrong reasons. Because I don't trust power. Because you, Iris swallowed hard. I don't like wasting time, she said finally. Valerie watched her for a long moment. Then she nodded once, as if accepting the answer as both true and insufficient. The world outside the room continued without them. The HVAC breathed softly. Somewhere down the hall, a cleaner's cart rolled over carpet, wheels whispering. A distant door clicked shut. Time passed in small increments, unnoticed and relentless. Valerie reached for the pen she had placed between them. She turned it slowly between her fingers, the metal catching the light. You could have stayed invisible, Valerie said almost thoughtfully. You tried to. Iris felt her stomach tighten. I did stay invisible. Valerie's gaze sharpened. No. 1 syllable. Absolute. You're here, Valerie said. In this room, at this hour. Iris forced herself to breathe evenly. Because someone copied me on an email. Valerie's eyes held hers. And you answered? Iris couldn't deny that. She had answered because she couldn't not answer. She had answered because when something cracked open, a door, an opportunity, a mistake, she stepped through before she could talk herself out of it. She hated herself for that kind of courage. It never felt like courage in the moment. It felt like hunger. Valerie's gaze stayed on her, steady, unblinking. Iris realized with a sudden jolt that Valerie's attention was not passive. It was active. It was chosen. Valerie didn't look at people unless she meant to. Iris's mouth went dry. Valerie set the pen down. The small click sounded louder than it should have. Tell me what you want, Valerie said. The sentence landed like a hand on a throat, not squeezing, not cruel, just claiming the space where breath happened. Iris froze. She knew, with a clarity that made her dizzy, that Valerie did not mean. What do you want for your career? Valerie did not mean, what do you want from this contract revision? Valerie's eyes stayed on Iris' face, patient, waiting. Iris felt her body respond before her mind could decide what to do. A slow warmth in her chest. A tightening low in her stomach. Her spine straightening as if pulled by an invisible thread. It was obscene how quickly the air changed when a question was asked plainly. Iris opened her mouth. Closed it. I mean, no. Not that. Not exactly. Words failed her, not because she had nothing to say, but because what she wanted did not exist safely in language. She wanted to be close without being consumed. She wanted to be seen without being taken. She wanted to stand in the gravity of Valerie Hargrave and not disappear. She wanted Valerie's attention to stay on her and not be a mistake tomorrow morning. Iris forced her voice out, smaller than she intended. I want to do good work. Valerie's gaze didn't soften. It didn't harden. It only deepened, as if Iris had offered a coin and Valerie had weighed it in her palm. "That's not what I asked," Valerie said quietly. Iris's heartbeat stumbled. The room went still in a way that felt controlled, deliberate, like Valerie had closed a door inside the air. Iris stared at the folder. The words blurred. Her reflection in the polished table looked pale, distant, like someone watching from underwater. Valerie stood slowly. The chair made a soft sound against carpet. Valerie walked around the table, unhurried, and stopped beside Iris' chair. Iris did not move. She could not. Valerie's presence was too close, too heavy, like warmth radiating from a stone that had been in the sun all day. Valerie's hand rested on the back of Iris' chair, not touching Iris, close enough that Iris could feel the shift in air. Iris's breath caught. She forced it out again, quietly. Valerie's voice came from above, near Iris's ear, but not intimate, no, still controlled. Still careful. Yet the proximity made the words feel like they belonged to Iris's skin. "You don't have to answer," Valerie said. "Not tonight." Iris's eyes closed for a fraction of a second. Relief and disappointment tangled in her chest until she couldn't tell them apart. Valerie's fingers tightened slightly on the chair back, then released. Iris felt absurdly the absence of that pressure, as if it had been a touch. Valerie stepped away and returned to her side of the table. She looked at Iris as if nothing had happened, as if the air had not shifted, as if Iris' body had not betrayed her. But Iris knew. Iris would not forget. Valerie gathered the folder with one smooth motion and slid it back to Iris. "Email this to legal," she said. "Tonight, yes," Iris managed. Valerie reached for her phone. She didn't check it. She only held it as if the weight of it grounded her. They moved through the room with a strange choreography, closing the folder, collecting the pen, switching off the lights. Ordinary emotions that felt charged, simply because they were shared in the aftermath of a question that had no safe answer. Outside, the corridor was dimmer now. The building's night mode had softened the lights, made everything look slightly unreal, like a world half asleep. They walked back toward the elevators without speaking. The silence was not empty. It was full of the unsaid, full of what Iris had almost admitted, full of what Valerie had almost demanded. At the elevator, Valerie pressed the button. They waited. The numbers shifted above the doors. Iris stared at Valerie's hand, the long fingers, the immaculate nails. She thought of that hand trembling once on the table, thought of the message on the phone, thought of the transfer completed without a word. Power, Iris realized, could be a kind of loneliness, a kind of constant sending. The elevator arrived. They stepped inside. The doors closed with a soft finality. Valerie looked at Iris' reflection in the mirrored wall. Not directly at Iris, only at the version of her caught in glass. Iris could see Valerie's gaze there, and because it wasn't face-to-face, it felt somehow more intimate. Like being watched without having to perform being watched. Valerie's voice was quiet. "You see too much." Iris's throat tightened. She kept her eyes on the floor indicator above the doors, but her reflection betrayed her. She lifted her chin slightly, as if refusing to apologize for her perception. "I can stop," Iris said, before she could think better of it. Valerie's gaze flicked to her, sharp. "No." Iris's breath stuttered. Valerie's eyes held hers through the mirror. "Don't stop," Valerie said. 2 words, simple. Not a confession. Not a promise. But they landed inside Iris like something irreversible. Something that changed the shape of her future thoughts. The elevator descended. Iris felt the weight of what had just been given to her. Permission to keep seeing. Permission to stay. Her mind returned, as it would return again and again, to the same circular thought, changing slightly each time, like a phrase tasted differently on different days. What happens when being seen isn't an accident anymore? The elevator doors opened on the lower floor. The world outside continued. A security guard at the desk reading, a distant printer whirring in a darkened office, the soft, indifferent brightness of Manhattan pressing against the windows. Valerie stepped out first, then paused. Iris almost collided with her. Valerie didn't turn fully. She only angled her head just enough to look back. Her gaze touched Iris's face for a moment, brief, controlled. But Iris felt it like heat. "Good night, Iris," Valerie said. The use of her name felt deliberate. A choice. A mark. Iris stood very still. Her voice came out softer than she intended. Good night, Miss Hargrave. Valerie's eyes narrowed slightly at the title. Faint disapproval, or something that resembled it. Then she turned and walked away, her heels quiet on carpet, her back straight, her silhouette unbreakable. Iris remained near the elevator, watching Valerie disappear into the corridor. She waited until Valerie was out of sight before she exhaled fully, as if she had been holding her breath for hours. Her body felt different. Not changed in any visible way, but rearranged internally, like furniture moved in the dark. Iris looked down at the folder in her hands. The paper was ordinary. The work was ordinary. She could email it. She could go home. She could return to her small studio in Bushwick and pretend tonight had been a normal late shift. But the thought wouldn't leave her. It circled, tightened, settled. You see too much. Don't stop. Iris pressed her thumb against the edge of the folder until it hurt. The small pain helped anchor her. Helped remind her she was still in her own body, still in her own life. Outside the windows, the city moved. Taxis flowed like bright blood through avenues. People laughed in bars. Someone argued on a corner. Somewhere, someone was being loved loudly without fear. Iris stood in the fluorescent quiet of Meridian Holdings and realized with a sudden sharp tenderness that she would never be invisible again. Not to Valerie. And the most frightening part, the part she couldn't admit even to herself, was that she didn't know if she wanted to disappear. She turned toward her desk to send the email, walking slowly, feeling the afterimage of Valerie's gaze on her skin like the memory of a hand that never quite touched. Morning arrived without ceremony. It always did in Manhattan, light slipping between buildings like an afterthought, the city already awake before most people had finished dreaming. Valerie noticed it first from the corner of her eye as she stood at the kitchen counter, espresso cooling untouched beside her. The windows of the penthouse reflected the pale gray of early day, glass against glass, nothing to interrupt the view except other towers watching back. She hadn't slept much. That, too, was ordinary. What was not ordinary was the way her thoughts had arranged themselves through the night, not in lists or contingencies or forecasts, but in fragments. A voice. A pause. The way Iris Delacroix had held her gaze without defiance, without apology. You see too much. Valerie tightened her fingers around the mug until the porcelain warmed her skin. She released it, annoyed at herself for needing the sensation. Across the city, Iris stood in the narrow kitchen of her studio, coffee brewing too fast, the smell sharp and bitter in the air. Her suit for the day hung over the back of a chair. Another gray one, pressed and careful, chosen before sleep had a chance to intervene. She watched the steam curl upward and thought, again, the elevator mirror. Of Valerie's eyes meeting hers there, not directly, but in reflection. Don't stop. The words had not faded. They hadn't softened overnight. They had settled. At Meridian Holdings, the day unfolded as if nothing had shifted. Valerie moved through meetings with the same composure she had honed over decades. Her board listened. Her executives nodded. Her decisions landed cleanly, efficiently, without tremor. No one remarked on the fact that she paused half a second longer than usual before signing a procurement approval. No one noticed that her gaze drifted, once toward the door, as if expecting someone who wasn't scheduled to arrive. Iris spent the morning 3 floors below, responding to emails, revising spreadsheets, making herself useful in the quiet, competent way that had always kept her safe. She typed steadily, posture straight, eyes trained on her screen. Yet beneath the surface something tugged at her attention, pulling it upward, toward a floor she didn't technically belong to. At 11:47, her inbox refreshed. A meeting request. No subject line. No agenda. Conference room, B noon. Iris stared at the screen for a full 10 seconds before accepting. Her pulse remained steady. Her hands did not shake. Only the smallest muscle beneath her left eye fluttered, a private betrayal. She arrived early. She always did. The room was the same as the night before, too bright, too polished, air faintly stale. Iris set her notebook down in the same chair without consciously deciding to. Muscle memory, perhaps. Or something more dangerous. Valerie entered exactly on time. She wore a different suit today, darker, softer in cut. Her hair was pulled back less severely, though still immaculate. She carried no folder, no pen. Only her phone, which she placed face down on the table with a practiced motion. "Good morning," Valerie said. "Good morning," Iris replied. They stood there for a moment, neither moving to sit. The silence was not awkward. It was expectant, like a held breath neither of them acknowledged. Valerie gestured toward the chairs. Iris sat. Valerie followed, positioning herself not across the table, but beside Iris, close enough that the space between them felt intentional. Valerie glanced at Iris' notebook. "You didn't bring the contract." "No," Iris said. "You didn't ask for it." A pause. Valerie's mouth curved, barely. "Good," Valerie said. They sat without speaking for several seconds. The HVAC hummed softly. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang and went unanswered. Valerie leaned back slightly. "I reviewed the revisions you sent last night." Iris nodded. "Legal responded this morning. They're aligned." Valerie looked at her then fully. "Not assessing. Not measuring. Just looking." "You stayed late," Valerie said. Iris shrugged one shoulder. It needed to be done. Valerie studied her profile. The tight knot of hair, the glasses, the careful neutrality Iris wore like armor. Valerie had seen the woman beneath it once briefly, and the memory pressed against her ribs with an unfamiliar insistence. "You don't have to prove anything," Valerie said. Iris's fingers stilled on her notebook. "I know." The words came out quickly. Too quickly. Valerie noticed. She always noticed. "I didn't mean that as a test," Valerie added more quietly. "I know," Iris repeated. They sat again in silence, the repetition settling between them like a shared language neither had fully learned yet. The meeting, if it could be called that, drifted. Valerie asked about Iris' workload. Iris answered honestly, not embellishing, not minimizing. Valerie listened, occasionally nodding, occasionally asking questions that revealed a startling attention to detail. At one point, Valerie reached for the carafe at the center of the table. Iris moved at the same time, both of them stopping short as their hands hovered near each other. A fraction of an inch. They laughed, not fully, not aloud. Just a breath of sound that acknowledged the coincidence without breaking it. Valerie poured water into Iris' glass first. The stream was steady. Controlled. Iris watched the water rise, felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with thirst. After, they moved closer without naming it. Chairs angled slightly. Knees nearly aligned. Iris could feel Valerie's presence like a low frequency, constant and grounding. Valerie asked about Iris' commute. About Bushwick. About nothing that would appear in a performance review. Iris answered cautiously at first, then with a little more ease. She described her neighborhood, the bodega on the corner that never quite got her order right, the neighbor upstairs who practiced cello late at night. Valerie listened as if these details mattered. "Do you like it there?" Valerie asked. Iris considered. "It's quiet enough. When I need it to be." Valerie nodded. "Silence has its uses." Iris looked at her. "And its costs." The words slipped out before Iris could stop them. Her breath caught immediately after. Valerie didn't flinch. She didn't deflect. She only held Iris' gaze, something thoughtful moving behind her eyes. "Yes," Valerie said. "It does." Something loosened then just slightly. Not a boundary. A tension. They left the conference room together, walking side by side toward the elevators. The hallway was busier now, employees moving between meetings, voices overlapping, the day in full motion. No one paid them particular attention. In the elevator, they stood closer than they had the night before, the space feeling smaller with other bodies present. Valerie faced forward. Iris stared at the numbers above the door. Their shoulders brushed when the car lurched slightly. Neither moved away. At Iris' floor, Valerie did not step out. She stayed inside the elevator, her gaze fixed ahead. "I'll see you later," Valerie said. "Not tonight. Not this evening. Later." Iris nodded. "Yes." The doors closed. The elevator rose. Iris stood there for a moment after, the corridor suddenly too bright, too loud. She returned to her desk slowly, aware of the way her body felt, lighter, unsettled, alert. Throughout the afternoon, their proximity echoed in small ways. An email from Valerie asking for Iris input on a staffing decision. A message sent without copying anyone else. A calendar invite for a brief check-in the next day. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing that couldn't be explained. And yet, by the end of the week, a pattern had formed. Coffee appeared on Iris's desk some mornings, black, no sugar, delivered by an assistant who never commented. Valerie's door remained open more often than not when Iris worked late, a subtle invitation that Iris both feared and accepted. They developed a rhythm, shared glances in meetings, brief conversations in hallways, the unspoken understanding that certain thoughts could be held between them without needing to be aired. Once passing each other near the elevators, Valerie placed a hand briefly at Iris's elbow to guide her around a cart. The touch was fleeting, professional. Iris felt it for hours. Another evening, Iris brought Valerie a revised document after most of the building had emptied. Valerie took it, their fingers brushing. Valerie did not pull away immediately. Neither did Iris. They worked side by side at Valerie's desk, reviewing language, marking changes. Iris read aloud. Valerie listened, occasionally interrupting with a suggestion. At 9 o'clock, Iris stood to leave. Valerie looked up. Stay. It wasn't an order. It was a request. Iris hesitated, then sat back down. They didn't talk much after that. They worked. The silence between them grew dense, intimate in a way Iris had never experienced in a workplace. The clock ticked. The city glowed beyond the windows. Valerie removed her jacket at some point, draping it over the back of her chair. Iris noticed the way Valerie's shoulders relaxed afterward just a little. Do you ever regret it? Iris asked suddenly. Valerie's pen paused. Regret. Choosing this, Iris said, gesturing vaguely. The work, the distance. Valerie considered the question. She did not answer immediately. I regret the things I told myself I didn't need, she said finally. Iris absorbed that. She nodded, as if storing the words somewhere safe. They finished the work shortly after. Valerie walked Iris to the elevator again. This time, when the doors closed, Valerie did not look at the reflection. She looked directly at Iris. You're doing well, Valerie said. The praise landed differently now. Deeper. More personal. Thank you, Iris replied. The elevator descended. At the lobby, Valerie stepped out, then paused, turning back to Iris. Good night, she said. Iris met her gaze. Good night. The doors closed. Alone, descending, Iris rested her forehead briefly against the cool metal wall. She exhaled slowly, feeling the echo of Valerie's presence settle into her bones. She understood now that something had shifted, not in a way that could be named or pointed to, but in a way that made returning to before impossible. Closeness had crept in through routine, through silence, through the simple fact of being allowed to remain. As she stepped out onto the street, the city wrapping around her in noise and light, Iris felt the familiar thought return, altered but persistent. What happens when being seen becomes a habit? Valerie told herself she wasn't waiting for anything. The week had been full. Earnings calls, board pressure, a lawsuit that needed to be contained before it could become a story. The kind of work that lived inside her bones. The kind that had always kept her upright. Still, on Friday afternoon, she found herself looking at the time more often than she needed to. Not with impatience. With something quieter. A faint, private awareness that the day was moving toward a point she couldn't quite name. The annual gala had been on her calendar for months, circled by other people's anticipation. For Valerie, it was always the same. A room full of admiration and performance. Champagne she wouldn't drink. Executives leaning too close with laughter they didn't mean. She usually left early, precise about it, decisive. This year she stayed in her office later than usual before heading to the venue, as if delaying would change anything. Outside her door, Meridian's floor hummed with a different energy, softened lights, fewer people, and those who remained moving with quiet purpose, as if the building itself was dressing for the evening. The assistants who would attend were already in heels and dark dresses, their hair different, their faces more open. Men in suits looked more careful than they had all week, smoothing ties, rechecking cufflinks. Valerie stood at her window and watched the city begin to glow. She had spent decades living above Manhattan, looking down at it as though it were a machine she could understand. Tonight, it looked almost tender. Streets ribboned with light. People gathering at corners. A life pulsing far below her control. Her phone vibrated once on the desk. A message. A request. Money. No greeting. Valerie's thumb hovered, then moved. Tap. Transfer. Done. Her face didn't change. Her lungs did. A breath that felt like it scraped against something inside her. She put the phone down and stared at the glass of the window until her reflection blurred. In the softened light, she looked almost like the woman she had been before the Empire, before distance became instinct, before silence became weapon. Then she heard it, a soft knock at her open door. Valerie didn't turn immediately. She didn't want to look eager. She didn't want to look like she had expected anyone. When she did turn, Iris was standing there with a garment bag in one hand and a small paper cup in the other. Black coffee. Of course. Iris stepped in without asking, quiet and composed in her gray suit, her hair still pinned into that tight knot that always looked like it hurt. Her glasses sat heavy on her face, erasing her in a way that was almost deliberate art. "I thought you might need this," Iris said, holding out the coffee. Valerie's fingers closed around the cup. The warmth seeped into her skin. It felt grounding in a way she resented. "You shouldn't be here," Valerie said. It wasn't reprimand. It wasn't permission. It was the truth. Iris's gaze stayed steady. "You asked me to check the final numbers for the Foundation's donation line." Valerie had. She remembered sending the message late last night, a request that didn't need to be urgent. The work could have waited until Monday. "You did it," Valerie said. "Yes." Valerie sipped the coffee. Bitter. Sharp. Perfect. She felt absurdly taken care of. Iris held up the garment bag. "Your assistant asked if I could bring this from your closet. She said you were occupied." Valerie's eyes flicked to the bag. A dress she would wear because it made people stop talking when she entered. Armor in silk. "Thank you," Valerie said. Iris didn't leave. There was a silence that didn't belong to work. Not fully. Valerie set the coffee down and glanced at Iris' hands. Long fingers. Clean nails. The small tension in the knuckles. Always, as if she were holding something back. Valerie's gaze lifted to Iris' eyes. "Are you going?" Valerie asked, though she already knew the answer. Iris's mouth tightened slightly. "I wasn't planning to." Valerie waited. It was what she did. She knew how to make people fill silence. Iris added, quieter, "I don't like events like that." Valerie's voice came out low, almost dry. "Neither do I." For a moment, something almost like understanding passed between them. Two women who hated being looked at for the wrong reasons, who had learned to control perception, because perception was dangerous. Valerie's gaze dropped to Iris's suit. "You have something else," she said. Not a question. Iris's breath shifted. A tiny pause. Then she nodded once. "Yes." Valerie felt the word land inside her like a spark. She should have let it go. She should have stayed with the safe line of conversation. Instead, she heard herself say, "Bring it." Iris didn't move right away. Her throat worked once like she swallowed something unspoken. Then she turned and left the office without another word. Valerie remained by the window, her hand resting on the edge of her desk. She thought she could feel her own pulse in her fingertips. She tried to slow it. She had controlled entire rooms with less effort. A few minutes later, Iris returned, carrying a second garment bag. This one slimmer, darker. She set it carefully on the chair by Valerie's desk, as if the object itself carried weight. Valerie looked at it for a long moment before meeting Iris' gaze. "You don't have to," Valerie said. Iris's voice was steady, but not hard. "I know." Valerie's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then why are you?" Iris stared at her, and for a moment Valerie saw the faintest crack in Iris's composure. Not fear. Not uncertainty. Something more intimate. The effort it took to hold herself contained. "I'm tired of hiding," Iris said quietly. The words were simple. They changed the air. Valerie didn't respond immediately. She couldn't. Something in her chest tightened, like her ribs had shifted. "You think this is hiding?" Valerie asked, though she knew she wasn't talking about clothes anymore. Iris's gaze dropped for a beat, then returned, direct. "I think it's survival." Valerie understood that language. She looked away first, irritated by her own reaction. She picked up her phone and put it down again without checking it. A useless gesture. Something to do with her hands. "Go get ready," Valerie said finally, voice controlled. "If you're going." Iris nodded once. "I'll be down in the lobby at 7. Valerie's eyes flicked up. "You're coming with me?" Iris's mouth curved faintly. Not a smile. A soft edge of daring. "If that's all right." Valerie should have said no. She should have kept lines intact. Instead, she heard herself say, yes. When Iris left, Valerie stood very still in her office, alone with the coffee and the garment bag and the echo of Iris' voice. I'm tired of hiding. Valerie felt the sentence repeat inside her, reshaping itself each time it returned. Tired of hiding. From who? From them. From yourself. From me. No. Not me. That was too close. She moved through her preparations with the same precision she applied to everything. Shower. Dress. Hair. Makeup minimal, perfect. She looked in the mirror and saw the familiar woman, the one who didn't need anyone, didn't ask, didn't soften. Then she thought of Iris' eyes through the elevator mirror, the way Iris had said, I can stop. Don't stop. Valerie's throat tightened. She adjusted her necklace, one simple strand of diamonds, then took her keys and left. In the lobby, she saw Iris before Iris saw her. Iris stood near the entrance, half turned toward the street, as if she might bolt. She wore a black dress that fit her, like it had been waiting for her all along. It wasn't loud. It was devastating in its simplicity. Thin straps, a clean neckline, fabric that traced the shape Iris usually hid. Her hair, freed from the punishing knot, fell in soft waves down her shoulders, catching the lobby lights like gold caught in dark water. No glasses. Her eyes were amber, clear and unguarded. Valerie stopped walking. For a moment, she was aware only of the way the air felt in her lungs. Too thin. Too sharp. Like she'd stepped somewhere higher than she meant to. Iris turned. Their eyes met. In Iris' face, Valerie saw flicker, recognition, exposure, the sudden awareness of being looked at. Iris's fingers lifted instinctively toward where her glasses would have been, then dropped again, embarrassed by the reflex. Valerie felt something she had not expected. Possessiveness, sharp and immediate. Not because Iris belonged to her, she didn't. Valerie did not believe in ownership, not in any way that could be spoken aloud. But she felt it anyway, a fear that the world would touch Iris with its gaze, take something before Valerie had finished understanding what she wanted. Iris stepped toward her slow. Is this too much? Her voice was quiet, careful. A question that was also an offering. Valerie forced herself to speak evenly. No. She swallowed, then added, softer. It's honest. Iris's shoulders eased a fraction. Relief flashed through her eyes. Valerie held Iris's gaze a beat longer than was reasonable. Then she turned toward the car, breaking the moment before it could become something she couldn't control. They rode downtown in silence. The car interior smelled like leather and clean air. Outside, the city blurred past in streaks of light. Iris sat beside Valerie, close but not touching. Valerie could feel her warmth through the space between their arms. It was a presence that didn't demand. It simply existed. Valerie stared out the window. Iris watched her hands. Neither of them spoke about how the silence felt different when it was shared with someone who saw you. At the venue, the gala swallowed them. A wall of sound. Laughter. Glass clinking. Music that felt too polished, too practiced. People turned as Valerie entered, instinctive, like sunflowers turning toward light. Valerie moved through the room with the same calm she always wore, greeting donors, nodding at executives. A hand on her back here, a compliment there. Eyes lingering too long, hoping to be remembered. She did not drink. Iris stayed close but slightly behind, as if she knew how to position herself in Valerie's orbit without making it obvious. The dress made her impossible to ignore, and Valerie felt it immediately. The way eyes shifted, the way people tried to identify her, the slight hunger in their curiosity. Valerie tightened internally. She smiled at someone speaking, her gaze unfocused. She could feel Iris being looked at. A man from the board leaned toward Valerie with a conspiratorial grin. Didn't know you had such interesting company tonight. Valerie's smile cooled. She's with me, she said, voice flat. The man laughed as if it were a joke. Lucky you. Valerie held his gaze until his laughter faltered. Yes, she said quietly. I am. The man retreated. Iris watched Valerie's face. Her eyes softened slightly, then hardened again, as if she remembered she wasn't supposed to react. Valerie moved them toward the edge of the room, away from the densest crowd. Iris followed without being told. Valerie noticed with a strange tightening in her chest how natural that had become. At a quieter corner near a tall window, Valerie paused. The city glittered below, indifferent and alive. Iris stood beside her, a space between their shoulders narrow. Valerie could smell Iris now, something warm and clean, like skin after a shower, undercut with a faint sweetness she couldn't name. Iris's voice came softly. Everyone is staring. Valerie's gaze stayed on the city. They stare at what they want to understand. Iris glanced at her. And what do they want to understand? Valerie's mouth tightened. She didn't answer. She didn't want to name the obvious truth, that Iris looked like temptation made visible, and this room was full of people who believed everything could be purchased. Valerie's hand lifted almost without thought and settled lightly on the small of Iris' back. Not gripping, not claiming, guiding. Iris's breath caught, audible in the quiet between them. She didn't move away. She didn't lean in either. She simply stood very still, absorbing the touch like a shock. Valerie felt Iris' body respond under her palm. Warmth, tension, the subtle shift of muscles trying not to betray too much. Valerie's hand dropped after a second. A controlled retreat. Iris turned her head slightly, eyes on Valerie's profile. "You don't touch people," Iris said, barely above a whisper. Valerie's gaze stayed forward. "I touch what I choose." The words left Valerie's mouth before she could weigh them. A mistake. A truth. Iris's throat moved as she swallowed. The air between them thickened, suddenly intimate despite the room around them. They stood there for a long moment, not speaking. The gala continued behind them, voices rising, laughter spilling, the world moving on. But in their corner, time slowed. Valerie felt her own thoughts circle, restless. This is dangerous. This is inevitable. This is nothing. This is everything. Iris looked away first, not because she couldn't hold the gaze, but because she needed air. She took a slow breath, then said carefully, "I should get you another coffee." Valerie's eyes narrowed slightly. "It's late for coffee." "I know," Iris said. Her mouth curved faintly. "But it's what I know how to give you." Valerie's chest tightened. She hated how tender that sounded. She hated that she wanted it anyway. "Fine," Valerie said. "But don't disappear." Iris's eyes flicked back to her, startled. "I won't." She moved into the crowd, weaving between bodies. Valerie watched her go. And that was when Valerie felt it. The first real fracture. Not a crack in her composure for anyone else to see. A fracture inside her, private and irreversible. She realized she didn't want Iris to be seen by this room. Not because Iris was hers, but because Valerie had already built a world in which Iris existed only in her line of sight. In silence. In late hours. In the private language of small gestures. Now the world had its own eyes on Iris. Its own hunger. Valerie's hand tightened around the edge of the window ledge until her knuckles whitened. When Iris returned, she carried 2 small cups, black coffee for Valerie, something lighter for herself. She handed Valerie the coffee without a word, and their fingers brushed. Iris didn't pull away immediately. Neither did Valerie. The contact lasted a fraction longer than necessary. A small rebellion against the room. Valerie's gaze dropped to their hands, then lifted to Iris' face. Iris looked flushed, not from heat, but from being looked at. From navigating the crowd. From returning. "I hate this," Iris admitted quietly. Valerie's voice was low. "Then why did you come?" Iris held her gaze. "Because you asked me not to disappear." Valerie's breath caught. It was too much, too direct, too simple. The room behind them roared with laughter at some joke Valerie couldn't hear. Music shifted. Glasses clinked. Valerie leaned closer, not fully, but enough that Iris could feel her. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." Iris's eyes softened. "You didn't." Valerie's brows tightened. "Then what is it?" Iris took a slow breath. Her voice came out quieter. "It's being seen, like this, by them. And..." She paused. Her gaze flicked to Valerie's mouth, then away. "And by you." Valerie's throat tightened. She had lived her life ensuring no one could see her unless she allowed it. She had believed that was strength. Now she stood in a room full of power and realized the most destabilizing thing she had ever experienced was a young woman admitting, softly, that Valerie's gaze mattered. Valerie's hand lifted again, slower this time, and touched Iris's wrist, bare skin, warm under her fingers. Iris inhaled sharply. Her eyes lifted to Valerie's face. Valerie's thumb shifted slightly, a small stroke along the pulse point. A question without words. Iris didn't move away. She didn't lean forward either. She only held Valerie's gaze with a steadiness that felt like consent, like choice. Valerie's voice came out low. "We can leave." Iris's lips parted. "Do you want to?" Valerie's eyes stayed on hers. "Yes." The truth shocked Valerie as it left her. Iris nodded once. "Then take me somewhere quiet." Valerie's hand slipped from Iris's wrist to her hand, fingers closing around Iris' palm. Not tight, just enough. Iris's breath shuddered. She followed. They moved through the crowd without explanation. Valerie's presence parted people instinctively. Iris stayed close at her side, their hands still joined, hidden low between their bodies where no one looked, unless they knew what to look for. In the hallway outside the main ballroom, the sound dropped off sharply. Carpet muffled footsteps. The air was cooler. The light softer. They stopped near a service corridor, away from the eyes and the music. Valerie released Iris' hand slowly, as if letting go required effort. Iris leaned back against the wall, breathing a little faster now that she was out of the room. She looked at Valerie with a mixture of relief and something else, something that made her eyes darker. Valerie watched Iris' throat as she swallowed. Watched the rise and fall of her chest. Iris's voice was barely audible. "I feel like I'm vibrating." Valerie's mouth tightened. "From what?" Iris's gaze held hers. "From being near you." The honesty struck Valerie like a physical blow. For a moment she couldn't speak. She couldn't move. Then Iris lifted her hand slowly and reached toward Valerie's collarbone. She stopped just short of touching, hovering. A question. Valerie's breath came shallow. She forced it out. Then she nodded, once. "Yes." Iris's fingertips touched Valerie's collarbone lightly, as if testing the reality of her. Valerie's skin reacted instantly, heat blooming under the touch, a sharp awareness of how close Iris was, how present. Valerie's hand rose, almost involuntary, and rested at Iris' waist. The fabric of the dress was smooth, cool. Iris's body beneath it was warm, alive. They stood there, breathing, not speaking. The world continued somewhere beyond the hallway. A door opened and closed far away. A cart rolled past at the other end of the corridor. Time moved. Valerie's gaze dropped to Iris' mouth. Iris's eyes tracked it, then lifted again, waiting. Valerie felt the old discipline in her, control, restraint, a lifetime of saying no with silence. And beneath it, something softer, more terrifying. The urge to choose. Valerie leaned in slowly, giving Iris the chance to move away. Iris didn't. Their mouths met with a gentleness that felt almost unbearable. No rush, no force, only the quiet press of lips and the shared exhale of two women who had held back for too long. Iris made a sound low in her throat, surprised, like she hadn't realized she could feel so much from something so small. Valerie's hand tightened at her waist for a second, then eased, grounding herself. The kiss deepened, not in speed, but in certainty. Iris's fingers slid from Valerie's collarbone up to the side of her neck, warm against Valerie's skin. Valerie's mouth softened, yielded. For a moment, Valerie forgot the room, forgot the building, forgot the empire. There was only Iris, breath, warmth, the faint taste of coffee, and something sweeter. Something human. Valerie pulled back first, not because she wanted to, but because she needed to see Iris' face. Iris's eyes were wide, dark, unguarded. Her lips were slightly parted. She looked like someone who had been struck by a truth. Valerie's thumb brushed Iris' cheek once, careful. "Are you all right?" Iris let out a shaky breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "I don't know." Valerie's chest tightened. "Tell me to stop." Iris stared at her for a beat, then shook her head once. Small, decisive. "No," Iris whispered. "Don't." Valerie's throat tightened. She leaned forward again, pressing her forehead briefly to Iris, letting the contact exist without more. They stood like that, breathing in the quiet hallway, their bodies close, their mouths still warm from what they had done. Behind them the gala continued as if nothing had happened, as if the world hadn't changed. But Valerie could feel it. The point of no return, subtle and internal. A line crossed not by the kiss itself, but by the choice underneath it. Iris whispered, almost to herself, "You're real." Valerie's eyes closed for a fraction of a second. The words pierced her. She had spent years being a symbol, a title, a force. Real was the most intimate thing anyone could call her. Valerie lifted her head. Her voice came out low and rougher than usual. We should go back. Iris stiffened slightly. Her eyes searched Valerie's face. Valerie added quickly, not because I regret it. Iris's breath caught. Then why? Valerie's mouth tightened. The old fear surfaced. Fear of being seen, fear of consequence, fear of what this would do to them both if it became public. Because, Valerie said, forcing steadiness, once we leave, they'll notice. Iris's expression shifted. Understanding, disappointment, something like relief. She nodded slowly. Okay. Valerie's hand slid down Iris' arm, fingers lingering at her wrist again, the same pulse point. A small grounding touch. Stay close, Valerie murmured. Iris's eyes lifted. I am. They returned to the ballroom with the same controlled posture they had left with. Valerie's face smooth. Iris composed, though her eyes looked different now, warmer, more awake. They moved through the crowd with practiced ease. Valerie spoke to donors. Iris smiled when addressed. No one could have guessed what had happened in the quiet hallway. And yet, Valerie felt it in her body like a secret bruise. Warm, tender, aching under the skin. Every time Iris came near, Valerie's awareness sharpened. Every time Iris looked at her, Valerie felt exposed in a way she had never permitted. Near midnight, Valerie's phone vibrated again. A message. Another request. Another reminder of the life Valerie had built, and the life she had failed to keep. Valerie stared at the phone without moving. Iris noticed. Of course she did. Iris leaned in slightly, voice low. Do you want to leave? Valerie looked at her. Really looked. The room was bright around them, full of people and power and noise. But Iris' presence created a pocket of quiet that felt like shelter. Valerie's throat tightened. Not yet. Iris nodded, accepting. Okay. Valerie didn't transfer the money right away. She didn't answer. She simply held the phone face down again, as if she could delay reality by refusing to look at it. Iris's hand brushed Valerie's sleeve lightly, an accidental touch made deliberate by the way it lingered. Valerie's breath caught. Iris whispered, almost inaudible. I'm still here. Valerie's chest tightened so sharply, she almost lost her composure. She turned her head slightly, as if to hide her face, then forced herself to speak in her usual tone. I know, she said. But inside the thought returned, circling with new weight, repeating until it became a fixation she couldn't escape. If Iris stays, something else will have to change. Valerie held her expression smooth while her world tilted quietly beneath her feet. The first thing Valerie noticed was how ordinary the morning looked after the gala. The city hadn't changed. The skyline still held its rigid confidence. Her penthouse still smelled faintly of cedar and clean glass. The espresso machine still made the same small, obedient sound when she pressed the button. Even the sunlight, thin, pale, angled between buildings, arrived as if nothing had happened in a quiet hallway beyond a ballroom. And yet, Valerie's mouth tasted like coffee and something softer she couldn't name, a memory more than a flavor. Her skin felt too awake, as if the nerve endings beneath her collarbone had been rewired overnight. She stood at the counter in a robe she'd owned for years, watching steam rise and fold into itself. She didn't reach for her phone. She didn't want the world to intrude too soon. But the world always intruded. Her phone vibrated on the marble. Once. Then again. Valerie stared at it without moving. The screen lit up. A message. A request. Money. No greeting. No softness. The same blunt need, unmodified by the fact that Valerie had been awake all night, or that she'd spent an entire life turning herself into a person others could rely on without ever learning how to rely back. Valerie's thumb hovered. Tap. Transfer. Her hand stopped. Not because she couldn't. Because she didn't want to feel what came after. She set the phone back down and waited for something inside her to settle. It didn't. The tension stayed high in her chest, a held breath that refused to release. Across the city, Iris woke with the same sense of quiet aftermath, the same stubborn insistence of memory. Her studio in Bushwick was small, cluttered in a way that felt earned, books stacked at odd angles, a mug collection that didn't match, a throw blanket folded neatly over the arm of a worn chair. The radiator hissed softly. Somewhere outside, a delivery truck reversed with a familiar beep. Life continuing. Iris stood barefoot on the cold floor, coffee in hand, and stared at her reflection in the dark window. Her hair was loose, still softly waved from last night. She hadn't put her glasses on yet. Without them, her face looked too exposed, like an honest thing. She lifted her fingers to her mouth, not to check lipstick, not to perform some glamorous memory of the gala, only to feel the faint swelling there, the small tenderness that proved it wasn't a dream. Valerie's mouth had been warm, controlled, careful. Valerie had asked if she was all right. Iris exhaled slowly, leaning her forehead against the window pane until the coolness steadied her. The thought returned, circling, repeating with slight shifts each time. If she saw me then? Does she see me now? She didn't know what she wanted the answer to be. By Monday, Meridian Holdings snapped back into its high-speed rhythm. The gala became a faint aftertaste, discussed briefly and then swallowed by the week's demands. Email chains replaced champagne. The elevator mirrors replaced soft hallway light. Valerie arrived early, as she always did, wearing a suit that returned her to familiar armor. Her face was composed, her posture immaculate. Her employees greeted her with the same careful respect, the same practiced distance. No one looked at her and saw that something had changed. Iris arrived on her floor and sat at her desk with the same efficiency, the same quiet competence. She put her glasses on, pinned her hair back into a knot that made her scalp ache, and disappeared into the gray world she had built for herself. Except now, disappearing felt like a kind of denial. Her computer chimed. A meeting request. Conference room B915. No subject line. No agenda. Iris' pulse jumped, then steadied. She accepted. When she reached the room, Valerie was already there. She stood by the window, looking out at the city. Her hands were behind her back, fingers interlaced. The posture looked like control. Iris recognized it now as containment. Valerie turned as Iris entered. Her expression was neutral. Her eyes were not. They moved over Iris' face with a familiarity that was almost frightening. A recognition too precise to belong to workplace routine. Iris felt it in her body first, heat rising behind her ribs, a subtle tightening low in her stomach as if her skin remembered the hallway better than her mind wanted to. Valerie's gaze flicked to Iris' mouth. Then away, controlled. "Good morning," Valerie said. "Good morning," Iris replied, the words sounding too careful in the bright room. Silence settled. Not awkward. Not empty. Full. Valerie gestured toward the chair. Iris sat. Valerie sat beside her, as she had begun to do more often now, making the closeness feel normal by repetition. Iris hated how quickly her body learned to expect that small shift of air, that warmth near her shoulder. Valerie placed a folder on the table, but she didn't open it. Instead, she looked at Iris as if the folder was an excuse. "I want to discuss staffing," Valerie said. Iris nodded. "Of course." Valerie spoke through the names, the roles, the restructuring. Iris listened, took notes, responded where needed. Their voices stayed low. Professional. Controlled. And beneath every sentence, the memory of last night pressed, insistent. At one point, Valerie's phone vibrated. Valerie didn't reach for it immediately. She glanced at the screen, then flipped the phone face down with a little too much precision. Iris noticed the movement. The slight tension in Valerie's jaw. The way her breath held for a fraction longer than it should have. Iris didn't ask. "Not yet." Valerie continued speaking as if nothing had happened. Iris took notes as if nothing had shifted. But something had shifted. Valerie's fingers tapped once against the table, then stopped. A small betray of nervous energy. Valerie never tapped. Iris watched that finger. Her mind looped, circling the same question in different forms. Is she ashamed? Is she afraid? Is she waiting for me to pretend it didn't happen? No. Not that. Not exactly. Valerie finished the staffing discussion and closed the folder without looking at it. She sat very still. "So," Valerie said, voice carefully neutral. Iris's breath tightened. "So." Valerie's gaze moved to the window, then back to Iris. "We shouldn't." The words stopped. Valerie's throat worked once. She swallowed. Iris waited. She didn't fill the silence. She didn't rescue Valerie from her own hesitation. That was the old Iris. The invisible Iris. The one who smoothed things over so she could remain safe. This Iris sat very still and let Valerie struggle. Valerie's eyes narrowed slightly, as if irritated at herself for not being able to speak cleanly. We shouldn't let this become visible. Iris felt the word land like a small bruise. Visible. Not wrong. Not regrettable. Not a mistake. Visible. Iris nodded once, slowly. Okay. Valerie's gaze sharpened. You're not angry. Iris's mouth tightened. Should I be? Valerie held her gaze. No. Iris let a breath out through her nose. Then I'm not. Valerie stared at her for a long moment, as if searching for the trap. Valerie was used to traps, used to negotiations hidden inside politeness. Iris didn't offer one. The silence stretched. Valerie's voice, when it came, was softer. I don't want to put you in danger. Iris's throat tightened. It's not your job to protect me. Valerie's eyes flicked to Iris' mouth again, then away. It is if I'm the reason. Iris felt heat rise behind her eyes. Not tears, exactly. Something more like the pressure of being spoken to with real care. She wanted to say something reckless. Something honest. Something that would make Valerie flinch. Instead she said, quietly, What are you afraid of? Valerie's jaw tightened. She looked away. Her gaze fixed on the city as if the skyline could provide an answer. I have enemies, Valerie said finally. Factual. People who would use anything. Iris nodded. Including me. Valerie's eyes returned to her, sharper. Don't say it like that. Iris's mouth curved faintly, not a smile. A recognition. Like what? Valerie's voice lowered. Like you're disposable. Iris felt something in her chest twist. For a moment she couldn't speak. Valerie's eyes held hers, steady. You're not, Valerie said. The words hit Iris harder than the kiss had. Because a kiss could be desire. A moment. A lapse in control. This sounded like choice. Iris looked down at her notebook, fingers tightening around the pen until it hurt. She needed the pain. Something to anchor her. The meeting ended without officially ending. Valerie stood. Iris stood. They moved through the motions, closing folders, collecting pens, turning off lights, life continuing around the thing they couldn't name. In the hallway they walked side by side toward the elevators, their shoulders close. Iris could feel Valerie's presence like a low hum. At the elevator, Valerie pressed the button. They waited. The numbers shifted. Valerie didn't look at Iris directly. She stared at the doors as if watching them could keep her from doing something foolish. Iris watched Valerie's profile, the clean line of her jaw, the stillness in her mouth that had always been intimidating and now felt like something else entirely. Effort. The elevator arrived. They stepped in. The doors closed. Silence. And then, without turning her head, Valerie spoke quietly. Do you regret it? Iris's breath caught. She didn't ask what Valerie meant. She knew. No, Iris said. Valerie's shoulders eased by a fraction. Almost imperceptible. Good. Iris stared at the floor indicator, heart beating too hard against her ribs. Do you? Valerie's voice came after a pause that felt like a wound being reopened. No. Then softer, but I'm afraid. Iris's throat tightened. She turned her head slightly, meeting Valerie's gaze in the mirror. Of what? Iris whispered. Valerie's eyes held hers. Of wanting it again. The elevator descended. Iris felt a warmth bloom in her chest, tender and terrifying. She didn't respond. She didn't have safe words. The doors opened on Iris' floor. She stepped out. Valerie remained inside. Their eyes held through the narrowing gap as the doors closed. Iris stood in the corridor, breath shallow, feeling the weight of Valerie's confession settle into her bones like a secret tattoo. Wanting it again, as if wanting it had ever been avoidable. That afternoon, the outside world intruded in small, indifferent ways. A junior analyst made a mistake and Iris corrected it without irritation. A manager asked for a report, and Iris delivered it on time. The office kitchen ran out of oat milk and someone complained too loudly. The printer jammed on the 4th floor. A security update forced everyone to reset passwords. Life continued. And beneath it, Iris' mind returned, again and again, to Valerie's words. I'm afraid of wanting it again. By evening, Iris stayed late, not because she had to, but because she didn't know how to go home and sit alone with the memory of Valerie's gaze. The building emptied. The hum softened. The lights dimmed slightly. At 9, Iris brought Valerie black coffee without being asked. She walked up to the executive floor with the cup held carefully, as if it were fragile. As if this small routine was the only safe way she knew to be close without crossing a line. Valerie's door was open. An invitation. Iris stepped inside. Valerie was at her desk, reading. Her jacket was off, sleeves rolled to her forearms. She looked up as Iris entered, eyes tired, face composed. "You're still here," Valerie said. Iris set the coffee down gently. "So are you?" Valerie's mouth tightened slightly, almost amused. "I have to be." Iris didn't respond. She stood there for a moment, then turned toward the small seating area near the window. 2 chairs, a low table, a view that made the city look like a painting. Valerie watched her then, after a pause, stood and followed. They sat in silence, side by side, coffee between them, the city glowing beyond the glass. For several minutes neither spoke. This was one of those rare passages where nothing advanced, no new information, no shift in plot, only the weight of being near each other, the quiet of shared space. Iris listened to the hum of the building, the distant sound of an elevator, the soft tick of Valerie's watch when she moved her wrist slightly. Valerie stared at the city, jaw tight. Iris finally said quietly, "You didn't answer today." Valerie didn't look at her. "About what?" "About what you're afraid of," Iris said. "Not the wanting. The consequences." Valerie's breath tightened. She took a sip of coffee, as if the bitter taste could keep her grounded. "I have spent my life building a reputation," Valerie said. "It isn't just mine. It's the company's. It's thousands of jobs. It's power that people assume is stable because I look stable." Iris nodded slowly. "And you're afraid I make you look unstable." Valerie's gaze snapped to her. "No." The word came out sharper than intended. Valerie exhaled, controlled her voice. "I'm afraid you make me human." Iris felt the sentence land in her body like a slow, spreading warmth. Valerie's eyes stayed on hers. "And humans can be hurt." Iris's fingers curled around the arm of her chair. "You're already hurt." Valerie went still. The silence that followed was heavy, extended, not explained. Valerie's face tightened, but she didn't speak. Iris held the space, letting the truth sit between them without trying to fix it. Finally, Valerie looked away. "I don't discuss personal matters at work." Iris's mouth tightened. A small sting. "Is this work?" Valerie's gaze returned, sharp and tired. "It has to be." Iris nodded once. "Okay." Valerie watched her. "That's it? You're not going to argue?" Iris's voice was quiet. "I'm not trying to win." Valerie's throat worked once. She looked as if she didn't know what to do with that. They sat again in silence. The city continued outside. Time passed. Then Valerie's phone vibrated on the table. Once. Valerie stared at it. She didn't reach for it. Iris glanced at the phone, then looked away immediately, as if respecting the boundary. But she had already seen the name on the screen. No age. Just a name. A connection that carried weight like gravity. Valerie's fingers hovered. Her jaw tightened. She picked up the phone, then set it down again. Iris's voice was barely audible. "Is she coming?" Valerie's eyes closed for a fraction of a second. "She's downstairs." Iris's breath caught. "No." Valerie's voice was flat. "She didn't tell me she was coming." Iris felt her stomach tighten. The air seemed to sharpen. Valerie stood abruptly, as if movement could keep her from feeling. She walked to her desk, then back to the window, then back again. A rare restlessness in her. Iris watched, silent. Valerie stopped near the door, hand on the handle, not opening it yet. "I should send you home," Valerie said, voice controlled. Iris's throat tightened. "Do you want to?" Valerie turned, eyes hard. "It doesn't matter what I want." Iris stood slowly, the movement careful. "It does." Valerie's gaze flicked to Iris' mouth, then away. "Not tonight." Iris felt the sting again, sharper this time. She nodded once. "Okay." But she didn't move toward the door yet. She stayed standing in the room, waiting, as if something unfinished held her in place. Valerie's voice was quiet, almost harsh. "If she sees you." Iris's breath tightened. "She will." Valerie's jaw clenched. "And if she realizes." Iris cut in softly. "She already will." Valerie stared at her. Iris held the gaze, steady. "You look different when you look at me." Valerie's face tightened. For a moment she looked almost furious. At Iris, at herself, at the truth. Then her expression shifted into something quieter. Something like fear. The door handle turned in Valerie's hand. A knock sounded from the other side, faint but insistent. Valerie froze. Iris froze. The knock came again. Valerie didn't open the door yet. She stood with her hand on the handle as if she were holding back a flood. Iris's voice when it came was barely a whisper. "Do you want me to leave?" Valerie's throat worked once. She didn't answer immediately. Her silence carried the weight of two competing instincts, protect and keep. Another knock. Valerie's eyes met Iris's. In that glance lived everything. The gala hallway, the kiss, the confession, the fear, the wanting. Valerie's fingers tightened on the handle. Then she spoke, low and controlled, as if forcing herself into a decision she couldn't fully make. "Don't move," Valerie said. Iris's breath caught. Valerie turned the handle. The door began to open. The door opened on a narrow blade of corridor light. Valerie stood in it without stepping aside, her body aligned instinctively with the frame, not aggressive, not defensive, simply present. Charlotte stood on the other side, breath quick, eyes already sharp with conclusions she didn't want to be wrong about. Inside the office, Iris remained near the window, exactly where Valerie had asked her to stay. Still. Grounded. Visible. Charlotte's gaze found Iris almost immediately. "Of course it did." "So," Charlotte said, the word clipped, unfinished. "I see." Valerie didn't turn around. Her hand rested lightly on the doorframe, fingers splayed as if holding the space steady. "This isn't a good time." "It never is," Charlotte replied, not raising her voice. "But I didn't come for comfort." The silence that followed was heavy but clean. No one rushed to fill it. Iris felt the weight of the moment settle in her chest, not as fear, but as clarity. This was not a scene. It was an exposure. "I needed to know," Charlotte continued, quieter now, "if I still matter." Valerie's shoulders shifted almost imperceptibly. A breath taken carefully. "You do." Charlotte's mouth tightened. "You always say that." Valerie didn't deny it. The absence of denial said more than any defense could have. Charlotte's eyes flicked to Iris again, sharper this time, measuring not her youth, not her beauty, but her steadiness. "Is she why you stopped answering?" Valerie closed her eyes for a fraction of a second. "She's not a replacement," Valerie said evenly. Charlotte swallowed. "Then what is she?" Valerie hesitated. The hesitation landed like truth. Charlotte exhaled, something between disbelief and resignation. "You look at her the way you never looked at me when I was asking you to stay." The words were not accusation. They were observation. Iris felt something tighten in her chest. Not guilt, not rivalry, but grief for a wound she hadn't caused and could not heal. Valerie turned then, briefly, to Iris. Not for permission. For acknowledgement. Iris met her gaze without shrinking. Valerie turned back. "I don't know how to fix what I broke," she said. "But I won't pretend it didn't break." Charlotte stared at her, stunned by the admission. Then she nodded once, sharp and final. "Then stop paying for silence and start standing in it." Valerie absorbed that slowly. Charlotte stepped back. "I'm leaving," she said. "Not because I'm done, because I won't do this halfway anymore." Valerie nodded. "Neither will I." Charlotte hesitated, then said quietly, "Just don't lie." "I won't," Valerie replied. Charlotte turned and walked away without looking back. Valerie closed the door gently. The sound was small, final. For a long moment neither woman moved. The office felt different now, not emptier, but rearranged. As if the furniture of Valerie's life had been shifted into a shape that could no longer pretend to be temporary. Valerie leaned her forehead briefly against the door. When she turned, her composure was intact, but the effort behind it was visible. "I should apologize," she said, though her voice didn't carry certainty. Iris shook her head once. "You were honest." Valerie looked at her. Really looked. Was I? Iris stepped forward slowly, deliberately, closing the distance without haste, without urgency, choice made visible through movement. You didn't hide, Iris said softly. That matters. Valerie exhaled, something like a laugh breaking through tension. I don't know what I'm doing. Iris stopped close enough to feel Valerie's warmth. Neither do I. The honesty settled between them like relief. Valerie lifted her hand, hesitated, then touched Iris' cheek. Light. Careful. Iris leaned into the touch by instinct, her body answering before thought could intervene. The kiss came quietly. No urgency. No spectacle. Just the slow meeting of mouths, the shared breath, the unmistakable recognition of something already chosen. Iris's hands rested at Valerie's waist, steadying rather than pulling. Valerie's fingers curved at Iris' jaw, not claiming, holding. They separated only when breath demanded it. Valerie rested her forehead against Iris. This isn't simple. Iris smiled faintly. I didn't want simple. They stayed like that, breathing, letting the truth settle without explanation. Later, they sat near the window. Tea cooling between them. The city below continued its restless choreography, indifferent and alive. Valerie loosened her collar slightly, a small concession to comfort. Iris noticed. She always noticed. At some point, Valerie reached for Iris' hand. Not for reassurance, not to anchor, simply because it was there. Iris turned her palm upward without looking, fingers fitting easily, naturally. Time passed without being measured. Valerie picked up her phone and stared at it for a long moment. Then she typed words instead of numbers. Iris watched without comment. When Valerie sent the message, she exhaled slowly, as if stepping into colder air. That felt, Valerie searched, irreversible. Iris nodded. Some things should be. They didn't outline the future. They didn't negotiate terms. They talked about ordinary things, the way the city sounds at night, the strange comfort of routine, the habit of waking too early. At one point, Iris leaned her head lightly against Valerie's shoulder. Valerie stilled, then relaxed into it, her chin resting gently against Iris' hair. The intimacy was quiet. Sustained. Unremarkable to anyone watching. Devastating to those inside it. When Iris finally stood to leave, Valerie walked her to the elevator. In the mirrored box, their reflections looked composed, professional, untouched. Only they knew how much had changed. I'm not asking for guarantees, Valerie said quietly. Iris met her gaze in the mirror. I'm not offering them. The doors opened. Iris stepped inside, then paused. You don't have to be alone anymore, Iris said, not as promise, but as truth. Valerie held her gaze, something steady and unguarded there now. Neither do you. The doors closed. Valerie stood thereafter, listening to the hum fade, feeling the weight of a choice fully made. Not in passion, not in defiance, but in clarity. She returned to her office alone, the city glittering beyond the glass. For the first time in years, the silence did not feel like victory. It like space. Space she had chosen not to fill with distance. Some power is built in distance. Some love is built in the courage to remain close enough to be known. She didn't need another chapter. This one had already told the truth. Some endings don't close a door. They finally let the room breathe. If love is the decision to stop hiding, what part of ourselves do we risk losing when we stay unseen? Some stories don't end when the moment fades. They stay with us, asking to be felt. If this story awakens something you recognize, you're welcome to share your truth in the comments. And if this journey stayed with you, consider subscribing to Secret Garden Stories and sharing it with someone who might feel seen. Your support helps this space grow. A world with more love, more honesty, and less silence. Thank you for being here.